Hey guys, it's Turtle Gamers here, and today I'm back, and today I'm going to read Chapter 2, Cinderella. It's my perfect wedding. Perfect wedding. There are many books of these. So let's go. Cinderella's dreams were coming true at last. With the help of her mouse friends, she had managed to race down the stairs just in time to let the grand duck place the glass slipper on her foot. Guys, see? Now she and the prince were going to be married, and a new life filled with happiness would soon begin. But first there was a wedding to plan. So guys, this is the next page. Cinderella didn't have the fanciest idea where to begin. Prudence, who ran the castle household for the king, was happy to take charge. She sat with Cinderella and read off a long list of preparations. We must commission the royal dressmaker to design a royal wedding gown. We must send out invitations to royalty only, of course. We must discuss with the royal cook. We must ask the royal florist to create a magnificent bouquet. Excuse me, Prince, Cinderella said as soon as Prudence paused for a moment, but couldn't. The prince and I just have a simple wedding. Prince frowned. Cinderella, now that you are going to be a princess, you must start thinking big. This is how she looked, guys. Later Prudence arrived with the royal dressmaker and lots of wedding gowns. Cinderella slipped the first one on. It was covered with bows. And sashes from top to bottom. The guests will mistake me for present, Cinderella thought. Dutifully, Cinderella kept trying on dress after dress. The last was the most hideous and uncomfortable of all. Large jewels of all colors had been strewn onto the fabric, making it so heavy that Cinderella could barely stand up in it. Do you think you could design something plainer? She asked the royal dressmaker. Certainly not. Prudence cut in. Plain and princess do not go together. The next day, Prudence and Cinderella were called to visit the castle's royal florist shop. Well, this should be easy, Cinderella told the mice that morning. I love flowers. But when Prudence and Cinderella arrived, the florist greeted them with a bush. This is lovely, she said. But do you have something a bit smaller? Smaller? The florist turned to Prudence in disbelief. But this is royal wedding, is it not? And royal weddings are always big, big, big. This is perfect, Prudence said, taking the bouquet from Cinderella. You just have to know how to carry it. She held the flowers out in front of her and screamed. That afternoon, the mice found Cinderella all by herself. Where, bossy lady? Asked Gus. Poor Prudence, replied Cinderella. She got quite a nasty sting from the bee hidden in those flowers. The royal physician says she must stay in bed. But what about the wedding plans? Jug is worried. I will just have to take care of them myself. Cinderella declared, now what should I do first? Who's coming? Cinderella wondered Jack. The guest list. Good idea, Jack. Let's see. Well, of course, all of you are invited, Cinderella replied. She patted the blushing mice on the head. And my fairy godmother has to be there. Why, without her, the prince and I never would have met. A short while later, Cinderella's fairy godmother appeared. Did you call, dear? She asked Cinderella, and was delighted to see her special friend, and her fairy godmother was delighted to be going to a wedding. I just love weddings, the fairy godmother said dreamily. The beautiful gown, the towering cake, the romantic music. And I'm sure everything you've picked out is just lovely. Cinderella admitted she hadn't actually picked out anything yet. And when is the wedding, dear? Asked the fairy godmother. Gus counted on his fingers. Tomorrow, he announced. Oh my goodness, child, cried the fairy godmother. Then we'd better get started. Lots to do, Jack added. He and Gus unfurled Prudence list for the fairy godmother to see. We will plan an absolutely magical wedding for you, dear, the fairy godmother gushed. Now, let's begin with the dress. With a wave of the fairy godmother's wand, Cinderella was instantly adorned in an elegant white gown. But her fairy godmother had forgotten the veil. It's beautiful, Cinderella said. But don't you think it needs? The fairy godmother wasn't listening. She was already on the next item. Invitations, she declared in moments. Hundreds of lovely pink cards sat in stacks around the room. Now we shall prepare the feast and make the cake, she announced. I want everything to be perfect. Whew. Close a call, said Jack, and as he and Gus raced away from Pom Pom and caught up with Cinderella in the castle kitchen. And now for the best part, the fairy godmother announced. Cinderella watched as her friend squeezed her eyes shut in concentration. Then, with one grand sweep of her wand, the fairy godmother created the biggest fantastic cake Cinderella had ever seen. What do you think? The fairy godmother asked. Cinderella hesitated, then said evenly, Prudence will love it. And speaking of Prudence, I really should go see how she's feeling. The fairy godmother frowned. She wondered why Cinderella wasn't more excited about the cake. The poor child just isn't herself. She decided, I think all these wedding plans are too much for her. Jack and Gus tugged at the fairy godmother's sleeve. Gently, Jack explained that Cinderella had a lot on her mind, such as missing the veil and the undelivered invitations. Cinderella likes smaller things, Jack told her. Gus pointed proudly to himself. Like mice, all at once. The fairy godmother understood. Later in Cinderella's chamber, the fairy godmother took Cinderella's hand. I'm afraid I may have gotten a bit carried away, my dear, the fairy godmother confessed. Now tell me, child, what would the wedding of your dreams be like? After listening attentively to Cinderella, the fairy godmother began to perform her magic with a wave of her wand. she began to set things right. In seconds, the hundreds of tiny pearls the mice were stitching onto Cinderella's veil were strewn into place. "We can't have a wedding without guests," the fairy godmother exclaimed. She directed her magic at the invitations, which rose off the floor in a swirl of sparkles. They sailed out the windows on their way to destinations near and far. Destinations near and far. Let's go on another page now, guys. The next day, Cinderella looked lovely in her simple white gown, veil, and gloves. In her hands, she carried a small bouquet of roses. The fairy godmother watched her with tears of joy in her eyes. "Such a beautiful bride," she sighed. But just as the king was about to escort her down the aisle, Cinderella looked down and gave a little cry of surprise. The fairy godmother followed the bride's gaze. "Good heavens, child," she exclaimed. "You can't get married in your bare feet." She waved her wand, and Cinderella's beautiful glass slippers picked out from underneath her gown. After the ceremony, the prince and Cinderella shared a joyous celebration with their guests. Everyone feasted on delicious, simple food and watched the newlywed couple dance as a small orchestra played all of Cinderella's favorite songs. It was the most wonderful wedding anyone in the kingdom could remember. Even Prudence was pleased. However, did you manage all this? The prince asked his new princess. Cinderella smiled and said, with friends by your side, anything is possible." Thank you guys. Hope you enjoy. Like, subscribe, and press the bell notification to see more videos like this. It will come up soon, guys, and you'll see the previous chapter 1 of Cinderella. Because this is just chapter 2, I wanted to show you guys. I was really excited. Bye, guys. Hope you enjoy. And remember, everything is possible with friends. Bye, guys.